What if I told you, history is not just about kings, battles, and inventions, but also about moments so dark, so terrifying, that even centuries later they still haunt us. These are not fairy tales. These events truly happened, and they will make you question how far humanity can go. The Black Death, 1347 to 1351. In the mid-14th century, Europe was struck by something so terrifying that it changed the course of history, the Black Death. It began quietly in 1347, arriving on ships from the east. The ships carried grain, and hidden among the sacks of food were black rats, infested with fleas carrying a deadly bacteria. That bacteria was about to wipe out millions. At first, people didn't understand what was happening. A neighbor would feel sick in the morning, and by nightfall they could be dead. The disease spread with terrifying speed, from ports to cities, from cities to small villages, leaving no place untouched. Victims suffered fever, chills, and black swellings on their bodies. The reason it was called the Black Death. The stench of death filled the air. Entire families vanished in days. Streets became silent, broken only by the sound of funeral carts and church bells tolling endlessly. Back then, nobody knew about germs or bacteria. Medicine was powerless. People blamed witches, foreigners, and even God's punishment for humanity's sins. Some turned to extreme religious rituals, whipping themselves in public, hoping for mercy. Others locked themselves away, fearing even to touch their own loved ones. The plague did not discriminate. Rich or poor, old or young, all were at risk. By the time it ended in 1351, the Black Death had claimed over 75 million lives worldwide, wiping out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a complete breakdown of society. Fields went untended, markets closed, and fear ruled every home. For years after, Europe would never be the same, haunted by the memory of those dark, silent days when death walked openly through the streets. The Great Fire of London, 1666. It was the early hours of September 2nd, 1666. Most of London was asleep, unaware that within minutes their city would face one of the most destructive fires in its history. The disaster began in a small bakery on Pudding Lane. A spark, perhaps from an oven, caught onto nearby wood. In today's world, this might be a small incident, but in 17th century London, houses were built closely together, made mostly of timber and roofed with thatch. The city was, in truth, a giant box of matches waiting to ignite. The fire spread quickly. Fanned by strong winds, flames leapt from house to house. Soon, entire streets were burning. The heat was so intense that glass melted, and people felt their skin burn, just from standing too close. Families ran through the streets carrying what they could, children in their arms, small bags of clothes, and sometimes even their pets. The city had no proper fire brigade, only small groups of men with leather buckets and hand pumps. But against this roaring inferno, their efforts were hopeless. For 4 days, London burned. The orange glow lit up the night sky, visible miles away. Churches, markets, and homes turned to ash. People camped on the open fields outside the city, watching helplessly as everything they had ever known disappeared in smoke. When the fire finally died, over 13,000 homes, 87 churches, and countless businesses were gone. Astonishingly, the official death toll was low, but historians believe many victims were never counted, as their remains were completely destroyed in the heat. The Great Fire of London was not just a disaster, it was a turning point. The city rebuilt with stronger materials, wider streets, and better safety measures, but the memory of those fiery days has burned itself into history forever. The Titanic disaster, 1912. It was April 10th, 1912, when the RMS Titanic, the largest and most luxurious ship of its time, set sail from Southampton, England, bound for New York City. She was a marvel of engineering, called unsinkable by newspapers. On board were more than 2,200 passengers and crew, from wealthy millionaires enjoying lavish suites to immigrants hoping for a new life in America. For the first 4 days, the journey was smooth. Passengers danced in grand halls, dined on fine meals, and marveled at the ship's beauty. But on the night of April 14th, the unthinkable happened. Just before midnight, lookouts spotted a massive iceberg directly ahead. Orders were shouted. The ship turned, but it was too late. The iceberg's jagged edge scraped along the Titanic's side, tearing open her hull below the waterline. At first, many didn't realize the danger. Music still played, and some passengers stayed in their rooms, thinking it was a minor incident. But water was flooding in fast. The ship was doomed. Lifeboats were uncovered, but there was a terrible truth. There were not enough for everyone on board. The crew ordered women and children first, and the lifeboats began lowering into the freezing Atlantic. Some were only half full. In the darkness, the Titanic's bow sank lower and lower. Lights flickered, and the ship broke apart with a roar before disappearing beneath the icy waters. Over 1,500 people died that night, either trapped on the ship or freezing in the ocean. Only about 700 survived to tell the story. The Titanic disaster became a symbol, not just of human tragedy, but of the danger of overconfidence. The unsinkable ship had sunk, and the world would never forget. The Dust Bowl, 1930s, USA. In the 1930s, the heart of America's farmlands turned into a scene from the end of the world. This period became known as the Dust Bowl, a natural and man-made disaster that destroyed lives, farms, and entire communities. It began with years of drought across states like Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Colorado. The sun burned hot in the sky, and not a drop of rain fell for months at a time. But nature alone wasn't to blame. Farmers, eager to grow more crops, had plowed away the thick grasses that once held the soil together. Without those roots, the land was left bare and vulnerable. Then came the winds. They swept across the dry fields, lifting the loose soil into the air. Soon, walls of dust, some hundreds of feet high, rolled across the land. Day turned to night in minutes. The storms were so thick that people couldn't see their own hands in front of their faces. Dust crept into every crack of every home. It coated furniture, food, and even the beds where children tried to sleep. People covered their faces with wet cloths just to breathe. Livestock died from suffocation, crops withered, and families had no choice but to abandon their farms. Some packed up and moved west, hoping to find work in California, but life there was harsh too. They were called Okies, often treated as outsiders in their own country. By the time the Dust Bowl finally ended, millions had been displaced, and the Great Depression's misery had deepened. The disaster taught America a painful lesson about caring for the land, one written in dust, wind, and human struggle. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945. In the final days of World War II, the world witnessed a form of destruction unlike anything it had ever seen before. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the Japanese city of Hiroshima was going about its morning routine, children walking to school, shopkeepers opening their stores, workers heading to factories. Then, without warning, a single American bomber dropped a weapon powered by the most terrifying force ever harnessed, the atomic bomb. In an instant, a blinding flash lit up the sky, followed by a wave of heat so intense it could melt metal. The blast flattened buildings for miles, and a dark mushroom cloud rose into the heavens. Tens of thousands died instantly, and many more suffered burns and radiation sickness in the days that followed. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, the city of Nagasaki met the same fate. Another atomic bomb exploded, bringing unimaginable destruction. Shadows of people were burned into walls, and survivors, known as hibakusha, carried the physical and emotional scars for the rest of their lives. The bombings killed over 200,000 people and forced Japan to surrender, ending the Second World War. But they also opened a new and frightening chapter in human history, one where humanity now had the power to destroy itself in seconds. Even today, Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as reminders of the cost of war, the value of peace, and the hope that such weapons will never be used again. History is full of moments that can shake us to our core, moments we must remember so we never repeat them. If you found these stories as powerful as I did, hit that like button, subscribe for more history brought to life, and share this video so others can learn the lessons of our past.